Welcome to College Talk, a podcast brought to you by American campus communities where students love living. Join us for topics including how to prepare your student and mom and dad for college so they can thrive. Now your host, Anthony Rad.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining us for our very first podcast episode of College Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Rad, and today's episode is titled Back in Class. In this episode, we will be hosting a discussion panel about navigating the return or start to college as campuses and classrooms open up this fall from the perspective of a seasoned parent, a student who navigated the pandemic and is returning as a junior, and an esteemed university leader. We are very excited to speak with our special guest today. Representing the parent perspective, Julie Wiesen, who is a mother of three, which includes 2 college graduates and a junior in college. The experience from her first child going off to college prompted her to start writing a blog, and you can find that at www.leavingthelighton.com. Please welcome Julie Wiesen.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Catherine, or Katy Berny, is a rising junior at Kennesaw State University who is studying accounting and is hoping to earn her CPA license and work in a corporate environment after graduation. She has a lot of insight into how she and students are thinking about the start of the fall semester. Please welcome Katy Berny.
Happy to be here.
And last but certainly not least, representing the university leader perspective, Dr. Julie Leos, who currently serves as the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Residential Education at the University of South Florida. In this role, she leads a team of scholar practitioners to enhance residential student learning through a curricular approach. Please welcome Dr. Julie Leos.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great. Thank you all for taking the time to speak with us today. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, of course, the new normal is upon us, and we're seeing changes everywhere in our communities, the workplace, and especially educational institutions. So my first question is to you, Katy. As a student, what's changed since COVID, and what are you expecting this upcoming academic year to be like?
That's such a great question. I feel like everything has changed. Personally, growing up, I was just in public school, so I never had online courses until COVID hit. So it was definitely an adjustment to make. And after about a year and a half, I think I've finally mastered online classes just for them to send us back. I'm really happy to go in person now, but I think really just to expect the unexpected. We don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like my generation can be really flexible with learning now that we've done it both ways. So I'm excited to get back on campus, especially as I'm getting into my junior year, my major courses. I think it's a great time to be back in person. So I'm really excited, but yeah, just expecting the unexpected.
You make a great point. This is your junior year, one of your most important years, as a college student. Do you feel like it's better to be back in person with your junior year upcoming, or do you kind of miss the hybrid classes or the online courses? Do you think you could focus more when it's online? How do you feel about that?
Of course, yeah. So I took my intermediate managerial accounting class hybrid, and I definitely feel like I learned better when I was in person. Like the days of the week that I was in person, it was a lot easier for me to connect with the people around us, even though we were 6 feet apart and had masks on, and it was just easier to ask people and the professor. We also had a student teacher as well, so there was a lot of aides in the classroom. So personally, I think that's where I thrive, actually in the classroom. So it is really beneficial for me going back in person. Now that I'm taking 3,000 and 4,000 classes, looking at internships and things like that, I think being on campus allows me to network better as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of universities, Dr. Leos, universities have received a lot of input from parents this year. So what exactly do universities want students and parents to know and expect in preparation for this new school year?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I'm glad that Katy went first because her voice matters probably the most in all of this.
Well, you all matter. Don't worry.
I think that she brought some good points about just what it was that she wanted to get back to, and some things that she learned was good for her and things that maybe were not conducive to her being as successful. And I think that that's one of the big key lessons to the past 17 months or however many months it was, is that flexibility is going to be key. So as a university administrator, I think about this from not only the standpoint of my employees, but also students, is that flexibility is the new pay raise. It's the new anything else that we can give to folks. And so as we're thinking about making a good experience for students, it really is taking inventory of everything that the students could want and making it available. One of the things that we are, I don't know if it's a struggle or a challenge or what it is, but we want to make sure that we're listening to parents and families just as much as we're listening, of course, to the students that are going to be coming to our campus or not coming to our campus. And I'll give an example is that for summer and for fall, we really listened to the parents and they were like, we need in-person classes. Our students really want that. And what I'm hearing from Katy is that that's similar. When we kind of got into real life where people are registering for classes and they're starting to get used to what's going to happen in the fall or even for this summer, most of the students were like, we don't want those in-person classes. They kind of were used to taking some of their courses online. And so where we found the most need was to bring back some more of the online virtual courses and hybrid courses. So that was kind of a surprise for us. And so we're learning too. And one thing I would, hope that folks would take away from this is that we're learning to what the needs of our parents and families are, and also what the needs of the students are. And sometimes we can't pick it up quickly enough, and we have to learn through experience. But I'm just grateful that we get the opportunity to be back here and to create an experience for students that really is right sized for them. And that's one thing I think that students have learned over the past year, is that they can make it what they want it to be.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Leos. Now, Julie, as a parent, she mentioned that she was, listening to students and parents. What was your personal preference this past year for students? And do you feel like you were heard by the university?
I'm the kind of parent to where I want my kids to try to go fight their battles as best they can on their own, unless they really, say, hey, we need some support here. But I'm trying to teach them, look, you need to go have the hard discussions. You need to go have the face-to-face to kind of fight for yourself or what you think is important. But I will say that this entire time, there's been a kind of a mental health crisis with a lot of kids. And so that's when, as a parent, you kind of got to know, all right, I got to step in here a little bit more, because they don't have the tools to necessarily do what they think they're trying to get accomplished. And so the parents need to step in. But what I have found from my children was they were desperate to be in class. They needed that socialization. They needed that. If nothing else, it helped them concentrate better when they were in class. They were able to zone out more when they were in front of the computer. This is what they told me. But the majority of the kids, I think in the beginning, thought that it was great to be virtual because you didn't have to get up and get dressed, and you could just, kind of do it wherever. The kind of the shiny red toy wore off. And the kids were desperate to be in the classroom, at least from what I had heard from parents. And but I really encourage my kids, my one daughter especially, who's going to be a junior. She was speaking with a professor about wanting to be in class, and he wanted it too. But they just could not take off some of the restrictions, given where the virus was at the time. But it enabled her to learn how to have, to fight for herself and to talk to that professor one-on-one. I never did any of that. High school, maybe, but college, they need to kind of learn to do that on their own.
Thank you for sharing that. Julie, let me ask you this. What have been some of the most impactful lessons learned while working with the individual needs and experiences of each of your children? Is it not one-size-fits-all approach, or is it a different one? Do you mind explaining that to our listeners?
Oh, my goodness. I think when they were little, I thought it was one-size-fits-all. But the more those little personalities start to emerge, the more you realize, oh, my goodness, what is good for the goose is not good for the gander. And all three of mine have different personalities. So I had to, when they went off to college, I had to kind of figure out, okay, which road do they need me to kind of step in on to help out? One did not want to talk a lot in the morning. The other one talked every single time she walked to class, an 8 o'clock class. And one thing that I do think is important, and I'd be interested to see if Katy feels the same way, let your child be the one to make most of the initiation to you. Meaning, don't be the parent that is constantly texting, calling, seeing how they are. Give them their time, and then when they want to reach out to you, let them reach out to you. Now, if a week has gone on, that might be a little too long. I don't mean don't ever reach out to them. But I have found that what works best is they would text me and call me when they wanted to, because they're the ones with the new life and the real busy schedule. I didn't want them to think that I was at home pining away from them, even though I missed them. I didn't want them to think that I was just going to be constantly trying to keep up with them. And so each one of them kind of found that little space on their own. One called more often than the other, one called every other day. And then, it's just every personality is different. You kind of got to learn the personality of your kids to kind of know what makes them tick. Katy,
what is your response to Julie's perspective there from student to parent?
I totally agree. Yeah, Julie's perspective is pretty spot on. For me, my freshman year, I lived on campus. I had a meal plan on campus. So I really didn't, quote unquote, need my parents. At that point, that's, how I was thinking. I got my first independence that I had in my entire life. So I remember the first couple of weeks, I don't think I communicated it as much as need be with them for them, but I was adjusting to new classes and everything. It's, it's so much new all at once and meeting people and new clubs and everything. But yeah, once I finally got settled in, me and my mom usually talk about every other day, sometimes every day. We'll text, send each other like little photos and memes and stuff like that. But we finally got into a cycle now that, we do it every day, and it's not even like, oh, gotta call mom. It's like, oh, it's, this is when me and mom usually talk.
I love that. If you excuse me, mom's texting me right now. I have to answer no, I'm just joking. But no, seriously.
I will tell you, Katie, when a mother sees her college-age kid calling, they will break their foot to get to the phone. And my son, my first one who had just left, was calling. I about broke my leg to go get that phone. It's like, he's calling, That does mean a lot to the parents.
Well, I love hearing that, because I think from the administrator standpoint, if we can, what we want to do is help the student to communicate with the parent, right? Like to be able to know what they need to know to get the parents information that they need. So that for two reasons. One, so the parents can feel confident that what Julie was saying is that they're asking the questions, they're able to kind of advocate for themselves. And then not only that, but then they can communicate that to people who really care about them. And I think that is a really important thing. So I'm glad to hear the other end of it too, because in that regard, I think that what we've been trying to do might be helpful for all parties.
Thank you all for sharing that. Now, Katie, going back to you, as a student, what exactly do you think universities and parents should know?
I was thinking about this for a little while, and the answer I decided to give is this kind of joke that me and my generation all have, like all the kids in college right now, that there's 3 generations of freshmen and 1 generation of seniors on campus. Because we have my class, the class of 2023, who was on campus for about, a semester and a half, and then COVID sent us home. And then we have, the 2024 freshmen who's really going into their sophomore year. And then we have our 2025 freshmen coming in just now for the first time. So we're all kind of lost together. I hope nobody asks me for directions on campus, because I'm going to be like, it's been a year. I have no idea. So let's figure it out together. Yeah. So I think that's nice to kind of we have a little bit of a bond there, but also we don't know what we're doing at the same time because we've all been online. So it's the transition, for all of us to learn.
Hashtag lost together. I love that. You need to coin that.
Yeah, that's great. Lost together.
To each of you, and we'll kind of go one by one, what resources have been very helpful in navigating the campus experience that parents and students may not know about? I'd love to start with Dr. Leos. Do you mind sharing with us?
Yeah, of course. What could I tell you? So there's a lot of resources on the website, on the campus that can be helpful to all of our parents. One of the things that came, I think we were doing them before, but really became more helpful during this pandemic, was just some virtual Q&A sessions, right? So orientation was doing them. From my perspective, talking to other housing directors, they were doing them at their institutions too, just to find out what does it mean to move in at this time? How is it that we're going to get information out? Social media has been, the universities are trying to get their social media up to par so that both families and students are able to gain access to the information that goes out pretty quickly. My experience over here at USF, specifically with the parent and family programs offices, has been something that I'd never experienced before, because they just do such a great job at connecting with parents and talking with them about what it is that they can or cannot do. They help them to break down some of the problems that students are having. So finding that connection point in those offices, I think, is important. And I think I'd be remiss to not, if I left out the housing professionals that are on the campus. One of the things about folks that work in housing is that they have to know everything, right? They're kind of a jack of all trades. We got to know, who's coming in, when they're coming in, what's happening with admissions, what's happening with different areas of the institution. And so if you can even find a number to the hall director, if you could find a number to, somebody who maybe not the RA because it's a student staff, they may not be able to talk to parents, but a professional staff, live-on professional staff who can help, they might be able to get you answers a little bit more quickly, because a director of a parent-family program might be an office of 3, right? And so working very specifically with housing professionals might be a good way for you to get information a little bit quickly. And if they don't know it, they can guide you to the right place, has been my experience and how I train my staff. And so that could be some support that you can find if you're far away or if your student hasn't called in over a week, right? So maybe that might be in a space where you can find out some simple answers.
Thank you, Dr. Leas. Katy, as a student, what are your thoughts? What resources have been very helpful in navigating the campus experience on your end?
Definitely advisors. Always go to your advisors. I don't have to go to them anymore. I don't have holds, but I always just go and check in once a semester, make sure nothing's changed in the curriculum, that I'm on the right path. And it's, again, a great way to build networking because they know a lot of people. A program that I'm a part of is called Thrive. We have graduation coaches through that, and I love my graduation coach. I would be nowhere without her. She's really helped me both just like mentally throughout this time, navigating the times. I remember one time I was having a difficult time with the online, and she was like, you just need to close your laptop, go out and go get an ice cream. She's like, just go get ice cream. You just need to leave and come back and then readjust to it. And I really took that to heart. Just sometimes you just got to take a break from it. If you're frustrated reading a topic over and over again, you're not going to get it. You got to take some time, come back, and then relook at it. So those two have been huge helps. Also, I have to say, social media, again, that's the future of everything. TikTok is a great way to connect with people my age and kind of build a sense of community online. So I felt like those three things have really helped me transition from online person to back in line and back in person.
Well, especially I think when you're sending your first one off to college when you've never gone through it before, it's extremely overwhelming because, you're not there to help them and to tell them what to do. And that's kind of the whole point of college too, is so they can break off on their own. Where my two of my girls went to UT, one is still at UT, and there is a parent Facebook page. And that has been an enormous resource because you have got parents all over who have the same questions. And so what you can do, and you can join this Facebook page, but they monitor it from the standpoint of you can't just go crazy asking crazy questions or comments and all that. It's very monitored. But you can even put in a little search bar, say, move-in day, and it can pull up all the old posts on move-in day. And so that is a great tool, is the parent Facebook page through the university. And then also go into orientation with your kids. When you go to orientation, you have the ability to ask a ton of questions yourself if you have them, because, your kid also has deer in the headlights. They're overwhelmed. And so sometimes they're not paying attention to all the details because they're in that overwhelmed stage. And so the parents being there at orientation can kind of help them, prioritize things. And I love what Katy said about the advisor, because anything I've heard about advisors has been amazing. They're almost like pseudo parents up there too. They can really help those kids, not just with strictly academic stuff, but they can kind of help them like they did with Katy. Close your laptop, take a breath, get some ice cream. So I really think that as far as parents can have to help squelch that overwhelmed feeling is connecting with other parents through social media, through the Facebook page, and orientation. I think that is huge. I
love that, Julia. And I can personally speak from experience. Back in 2003, University of Georgia, my parents accompanied me to our orientation. And you're right. Half the stuff just went in one ear, out the other. You're overwhelmed. You're excited. You're 17, 18 years old. You don't care about what they're saying. Half the stuff, you're just meeting people, seeing people, the sights and sounds. And I remember we got home after that weekend, and they had said, wow, I can't believe they have X, Y, Z. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. They said, well, you're in the same room, and they're talking about it. So where were you? But yes, I highly encourage all of our parent listeners out there, get involved, just something to kind of to put your student at ease. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. All right, ladies, I think we're about to do our final thoughts of our panel discussion here. Julie, I'm going to go back to you on this one. We ended with you, but we're going to start with you. Final thoughts about this discussion, and to our listeners out there about your perspective with this whole college experience and getting back to class.
Well, I would say my main one for parents is, especially if they've got the first one going off, actually it doesn't even matter if it's the first one going off, is anytime your child goes off to college, it's the first time they've been off to college. Be careful not to say this is going to be the best 4 years of your life. It might be, and it very well, it probably more than likely will be, but it might not be initially. I think kids have had this thought built up in their head, oh my gosh, college is going to be the best, the best, the best. And yes, it probably will be, but there are some kids, it takes them a little bit of time to get adjusted. So if you've got a child that's calling you the first month in going, I hate it and I want to come home, You just tell them to hang in there and don't make any decisions on anything until you get through that first semester. Just encourage them. Anything worth having takes time to get used to. But then you're going to have the kids that get there and never look back. I just have found that I had a lot of my friends and my kids' friends just weren't happy in the beginning. But it's because they were in a new spot and they didn't know anybody and they needed time. And so I think just encourage your child just to give it time if it's not going like you want it to go. But also remind them that you're paying for them to have a college education. You're not paying for them to go off and just do nothing but have fun. That as a parent, if you are paying for that education, you still have some say-so. You still have some say-so. So this is not you know what, they're off on their own, I'm not going to bother them. No, you have the right. You have the right to ask some questions. You have the right to expect some things. So maybe set those rules of engagement before they leave. Kind of say, all right, look, I'm not going to bug you. I'm going to give you your freedom, but also expect X, Y, and Z in return. And so it could be a whole other podcast talking about what it's like when they come home at Christmas and what that looks like.
Yeah, that's another episode. Yes.
That's for a whole other episode. And to socialize. Tell them to get out there and don't sit in their room. Get involved. Get involved. That will make a place that seems big feel small quickly when you get involved.
Thank you, Julie. And I think you said it best. College is a privilege, to students, whether the parents are paying for it, whether they're paying for it, et cetera. It is a privilege. Thank you for sharing that. Katy, I'm going to go to you. And what kind of feedback do you have for our student listeners out there?
I think from both the student perspective and the administrator perspective, as well as the parent, the two main things is just patience and flexibility. As long as, both ways, whether it's administrator to student, student to parent, parent to administrator, you just got to have patience and you got to have flexibility. And then no matter what happens with the virus, if we go back in person or we end up back online, if you have those two main things, I feel like it'll work out.
And of course, don't forget to call your mom, right, Katy?
Of course, yes.
Thank you for sharing. And Dr. Leos, what can you bring from the university official perspective for us, for our listeners out there?
Oh gosh, I think Julie might have covered it, and Katy too. Those are some things that we like to remind students about also. But I think one thing as we get back to campus, I really love the conversation around the advisor and finding that academic purpose, right? So I think now that we generally are back, still being mindful of that we may not be through this pandemic, but trying to get connected with what might be most helpful, in a career path, right? So there are ways to be involved socially, and there are also different ways to be involved in a way that can connect people to their career path. So maybe finding a living learning program that appears to be on a path of something that they want to do. I think from a parent perspective, giving students that, and Julie has said this, that latitude to find the things that they love to do so that they will want to do it and move through it more quickly, right? So if we've always wanted our children to be a doctor and they're not very good at science necessarily, then maybe it's okay to be like, okay, maybe this is not your thing. What most more closely aligns with what you can be doing, it will bring you joy the rest of your life, right? Because maybe those 4 years aren't the best 4 years of your life, and maybe the rest of your life is the best of your life, right? And so those are the things that, finding a career services office who will be able to help them, or connecting with faculty, that they would be, now that all the faculty are back, they can do that also, which I think is a very high impact practice. And how students see their work with faculty is how they see their career, right? They connect. If I talk to a faculty member, this is going to help me to be better later. And it fulfills them in ways that other folks can't on the campus. And so that's my advice, is just letting them live into what we think that they will be successful at doing, so that they can feel that within themselves as well.
And another great point from you, Dr. Leos, yes, students are back in class, but not just students, advisors, teachers, professors, university officials, all there to help you as resources, just another great example of what to look forward to this fall. Well, we really appreciate all of you taking the time to speak with us today. And this has been a very engaging conversation. And hopefully our listeners out there have some new perspectives and tools to help them have a successful start to the school year. And we want to wish you all the very best. Thank you for listening.